So, what is heterodox activism? Heterodox activism isn't really an official term yet, and the whole purpose of this channel is kind of to figure out what it could be in concrete, because it's more of an idea that I have, and the purpose of the term is kind of to distinguish my approach to activism to what I will refer to here as typical activism. So kind of the thing is that if you think about the typical activist person, I think you all have a lot of examples in your head right now of different activist groups. It's kind of always a person that has a certain cause or purpose that they try to advocate for, a certain societal issue where they want to advocate for certain solutions to that issue. And it's almost always the case that even if in some sense the cause or purpose might be a little bit vague, at the core an activist always has certain convictions that they try to hold up and stay loyal toward, and where they aren't really open at all to criticism, which is kind of due to the nature of any kind of advocacy, where you feel like you can't really have any doubts about what you're advocating for, because then how can you really advocate for a thing that you aren't even sure is a good thing? And the problem is that it kind of leads to a somewhat ideological state when you already decided from the start that this is the right thing to do, and there are no real questions to be asked about the things that you're advocating for. And most activist movements and most lobby organizations kind of create this black and white framework of good versus evil, where the only way to engage with criticism is kind of just to fight it off. And the whole purpose of the activism is just to defend your interests or the interests of the people that you say you're advocating for. And it's not really an engagement with the other side, because the other side is in the way of your cause and is evil and is questioning your cause, but your cause is the good thing to fight for. So it's the only reason to engage with critics is to debunk them. Even if you're respectful about it, it's just to get rid of the people that are in your way and don't know what's right yet, or are blatantly evil because their interests are opposed to your point of view. And the really simple idea of heterodox activism is kind of to figure out if there are ways to get around this problem, to engage with societal or political issues and topics without creating this predetermined stance of this is the point where you can't ask any more questions. And at first I should explain the heterodoxy part of activism, because activist is kind of already self-explanatory, but heterodoxy might be a word that you haven't really heard before. So in a simple way, heterodoxy is kind of just the opposite of orthodoxy. And orthodoxy is kind of this established position, and the kind of the mainstream opinion, maybe the establishment opinion, and heterodoxy is seen as this opposite, or the other opinions that are also there, but hetero kind of just means like different, but also different in like many different things. So, but you can mean it as the complete opposite to orthodoxy. You could also just mean it as different opinions, including also the orthodox opinion. And in terms of activism, that kind of means that even though sometimes activism might challenge the orthodoxy of a society, the way I just described typical activism, it seems that a lot of time it has its kind of its own orthodoxy of this is like the established assumption that can't be questioned, and the point of heterodox activism is kind of to, from the start, try to include all kinds of stances on a societal issue, and not just one cause and purpose that you try to get through no matter what. And the idea of heterodoxy that I'm using here is kind of inspired by an organization called Heterodox Academy, and they also have formulated a few principles that heterodoxy should be based on. So to make a little bit clearer what I mean with heterodoxy, I will also include those principles here. The first one is open inquiry. So that just means that you should have the ability to ask questions, to share ideas, and to also challenge existing assumptions without any risk of censure or exclusion from the group. And of course, especially the last part of challenging existing assumptions is a kind of thing that you see rather rarely in any kind of activist group or lobby organizations. So while there of course are a lot of activist movements that kind of brand themselves on challenging all the existing assumptions in society and questioning everything, it's kind of rare that you have an activist movement where internally the base assumptions are challenged by the people themselves. So there might be a lot of discussions going on there about what exactly should the end goal be and how one gets there, but at the core is still an issue where people are all kind of on the same page that this is a problem for those and those reasons, and this is kind of the direction where we want to go. And you might even think that that's kind of necessary for activism to work, but of course I'm trying to maybe change your mind on that. And the reason why for activism it's actually important to allow challenging those base assumptions is that a lot of times the more creative and innovative ideas come precisely from challenging all the existing assumptions and saying, hey, maybe we have done something wrong here all the time and we shouldn't double down on it all the time, but instead think about it from a new perspective. And then you suddenly see the world in a different light and you can finally fix the problem that you're trying to solve all the time. So if activism is trying to do problem solving, it's really stupid if you can't really inquire openly about the problem. So the next principle would be viewpoint diversity, which kind of seems like the same thing, but it's more like it's not just inquiring openly about things, but actively trying to get as many different perspectives and include as many different perspectives from the start. So you shouldn't do what activist groups are kind of doing nowadays, where they kind of filter from the start. Okay, these are the people that are on our team and that are going to work with us to get to a certain purpose, to challenge a certain cause. But instead you shouldn't filter and should try to figure out, okay, what are all the different people that care about this issue, even if they might have completely contrary views to mine about what's best in this situation. And that's kind of a thing that outside of activism is like kind of common sense, and especially in a democratic society, that you have this ideal of viewpoint diversity and getting different opinions on a certain topic to figure out what is really going on. But of course, as soon as you find yourself in an activist movement or a lobby organization, you already see that it would be kind of weird to first approach the people that are exactly of the opposite opinion and that seem to be like the evil guys that are in the way of what's good and right. So you kind of see the struggle here with typical activism and actually figuring out how to see the whole picture of the problem that you're solving. Then the last principle is constructive disagreement. It also seems like it's almost the same as viewpoint diversity, but the point here is not just it's not just that you are okay with a lot of disagreement, but also how you go about it. So if you disagree with people, you should be committed to collaboration with the person that you're disagreeing with, and not just with fighting off the criticism. You should also show a lot of curiosity and respect to the other person, and of course you should be humble about your own ideas. So you shouldn't assume that you know any better than the person that's in front of you. And this also brings me to another principle that has to do with humility, and that's this idea of intellectual humility, which isn't just about your own ideas and whether they are right or wrong, but about generally understanding how little you might know about certain topics. So even if you actually are an extremely smart and knowledgeable person, there are always limitations to not just your knowledge, but also everyone's ability to know at all. So there are always blind spots that we have. There are always uncertainties. It's almost never really possible to actually have 100% certainty about a certain topic. So it's always wise to say, okay, I don't know everything about this, and therefore if somebody challenges me on this, I shouldn't try to defend my take, but I should, as said, be curious and respectful to other people and be genuinely interested in learning something and in assuming, hey, maybe my ideas are wrong, and it's actually good if they are challenged, because then I can fix my mistakes, my wrong assumptions and all that. Now the question is, how the hell do you get this idea of heterodoxy together with activism, if it seems to be so contradictory in many ways to how people typically go about activism. So how do you combine heterodoxy with activism? So the problem with typical activism seems to me to be that it always kind of thinks in power dynamics. So even when it comes to individual action, it seems to always go straight to the idea of advocacy groups and activist movements or lobby organizations, where the only way for the individual to do anything about their situation, about the societal issue that they see, it's okay, go organize yourself with other people so that you kind of, at least as a mass of people, or because you're connected to the right key positions in society that have enough power to change anything, that's what you kind of have to do to, well, change the world for the better. You have to get organized to accumulate the kind of power that you need to change things. And it's also therefore always goes with this slogan, make the personal political. So I take my sometimes really personal issues and private issues, and I try to make them political, bring them into the political world of collective action, where, well, and in this way it always also thinks in about information in this weird way of it's always about spreading awareness or raising consciousness. Like, I have this issue and you all need to know about it, and raising consciousness actually means more than just awareness. It kind of means that you have a specific way of looking on this issue and thinking about this issue, and it kind of means the opposite of what I'm trying to do with heterodox activism, where you try to get as many different perspectives as possible. Raising consciousness means this specific way of thinking about it should be how we all should look at the topic. It's a really weird thing, but I think it's part of the very core ideals of typical activism, that it's okay, these are the interests, the cause that I need to defend, that I need to advocate for, and then I can't like take into consideration all the other ways of thinking about it. Now I have to defend those interests, fight for those interests against other people's interests, because that's, of course, then you have a bunch of advocacy groups and activist group movements and lobby organizations here, and they all kind of fight for attention or power in society to make their interests happen and their causes happen and reach their purpose. And it's, well, it's not really productive in any way. And the question now is, okay, how can you think differently about this? And I would propose that as a heterodox activist, one should completely go away from the very base assumption of even starting with a cause or purpose in the typical way. So you don't start with a finalized message of this is how things should be. Instead, you start with an open question. And by that you kind of change the entire way in which you even think about going about activism. Like you don't think in power dynamics, in okay, I need to get this thing to change society in that particular way or anything. You first start with simply exploring the very issue that you're trying to solve in society, and that can help you to take other perspectives into account, to take them all seriously, and it also makes you set different priorities. So it's not anymore about necessarily accumulating as many people as possible in your movement and forcing them all to have the same opinion. So like kind of the currency of typical activism is like the amount of people that have the same information and the same opinions about things. And the currency of heterodox activism is kind of in an almost opposite way. You want a lot of different perspectives, and it's not just about a quantitative measure of, okay, these many people follow like the same cause and the same opinions. It's more the relationship between people of different perspectives, and the relationship not just in the quantitative way, neither in how many different perspectives you know or how many different relations you have with people, but also in a qualitative sense, because it's not just about the explicit knowledge or information that you gain from people, but there's a sense in which you care much more about individual relationships, because there's some implicit knowledge in a relationship. So if I get to know a person or talk a lot with a friend, I might not even know that many explicit things about them or about the values that they have in a concrete way, so that I can write it down for you. But I do know them, I know things about them that I couldn't really explicate in any way, where I just get them in some sense emotionally and understand them empathically when I talk to them and engage with them, understand their emotions. And that's not just my relationship with that other person, but if I engage a lot with people of different perspectives, or people who have different interests than I have, and maybe even interests that are contrary to mine, if I learn to engage with them a lot and negotiate with them a lot, then I gain implicit knowledge about how to negotiate those situations, how to navigate them, how to negotiate with these people, so that we can productively and collaboratively fix the problems that we have in a society. And in that sense, the purpose isn't to like make your advocacy group, your interest group, the loudest and most powerful and most heard interest group in society, so that you get what you want, but instead you try to weave together the social fabric so that everybody can engage with each other about these topics in a much more productive, trust-based, social way of interacting with each other, rather than dividing each other into weird abstract categories where this is interest group number 1 for these people, this is interest group number 2 for those people, and then now they can fight with each other, kind of like the difference between mediation between two groups and a court situation where it's like this person against this person, and whoever has like the better advocate can win the judge's favor. Like it's a stupid thing. Like it has its purpose in some way, and I'm not trying to say that all advocacy groups and all activist movements are shit. The same way I wouldn't say that the court system is shit, but it's the point is you can also do these things in different ways, and kind of also fix a lot of problems that you have with people, a lot of fights that you have with people outside of the court system, or at least I would hope that you do that, and that you actually have some kind of social competence and don't have to get the help of the law all the time. And we kind of should think the same way about activism. And one thing that typical activism completely disregards is precisely the actual social component. Like, no matter how much they might care about social topics, they always, even if they themselves have this idea of grassroots activism, where you don't have like a top-down, powerful people decide how society should look like. Even if they are a grassroots movement by the people, it still is the idea of, okay, we're going to demand a law that then top-down orders society in the way in which we want it to be ordered. And it never really has this idea of, okay, well, maybe we should start socially interacting with each other and finding our own solutions ourselves, and then maybe out of that you can build new laws that just naturally seem to make sense out of the situations that you create with each other, and then they give like a framework to things. But instead it's always not like, it's not a framework, it's everything that I want society to look like needs to be somehow be encoded in this law code. So no, a lot of things happen informally, and a lot of things that you want to make better in society and want to change about society don't have to be demanded in the political landscape. They can just happen between people, because you get people to interact with each other and find their own ways of, maybe it's some form of tradition to organize each other's lives. And yeah, it's can be a much more simultaneously more individual way, but also social way, in the sense that, of course, you understand that you need to make compromises with each other, but that compromise doesn't need to be, okay, I get rights taken away. It just means I figure out together with you how we should approach each other. Yeah, that's kind of missing in activist ideals, because they always think really politically. Yeah. Now, that's my somewhat poorly articulated idea of what heterodox activism should be about. Because it's still in many ways really abstract, I kind of thought about two projects that I want to start to explore how to actually do heterodox activism in practice. And since I just explained that the kind of first idea, the basic idea of heterodox activism is to start with an open question, I will introduce to you those two projects as two open questions. So the first project has the open question: how do we gain knowledge we need to make better or wiser decisions? And that might seem like an extremely philosophical and abstract question, but I actually think that knowledge is in many ways an extremely social issue. So a lot of knowledge that we have or think that we have relies on all kinds of social institutions that create that knowledge, that inform us about the world. And of course, especially when we think about activism, about social problems, a lot of information that we get about those might even be the kind of knowledge that we exchange directly with each other. So it's not just this like abstract knowledge that you get from a book, but it's also okay if you go about your daily life and you make decisions, what kind of knowledge do you use to navigate the world? And in that sense, it's a really basic and important question if you want to change society at all, or like fix a problem in society at all. And it's also already a topic that is extremely social in many ways. And in that sense, I think it's would be an interesting project to try to figure out, okay, who could be all the different people with different perspectives that you could try asking just, okay, hey, what do you think about this? What should we do about all the problems we have about where we get our information from, what we think we know, how certain we should be about it, all that kind of stuff. And hopefully also figure out how we can create the kind of social relationships in our lives that help us kind of create a social infrastructure of knowledge to be more engaged with our community in a healthy way, where whenever we see a problem, we don't just go about it in a foolish manner, which I think is mostly what typical activism is doing, that you have a lot of people that think, hey, I know how this works, this is the solution, and I'm going about it just doing it that way, no matter what, and I will ignore all the unintended consequences that might have until it's too late. So probably better to approach from a really fundamental perspective. Hey, how do I even make better decisions, and who should I ask about how to make better decisions? Now, the next thing might be a little bit easier to understand what kind of activism could be done about that, and that's the question, how can men and women get along in our current society? The reason why I chose that as a project is, first of all, because it's kind of the most fundamental topic, especially when you think about where typical activism tends to divide people. Like, men and women are, especially in today's time, kind of the perfect example of, okay, you have a lot of different interest groups that take these abstract categories of social groups and say, okay, here's all the issues regarding women, all the problems that women have, here's all the issues regarding men, all the problems that men have, and we kind of think about it as if those things all go against each other, and now we have two groups in a shouting fight of, okay, who's got it worse, what do we do about this, and how can we scream louder about the interests we have. And it would be a little bit better if we would take an approach where we say, hey, how can those two sides get along better, and who should we start asking to create productive conversations about this, and maybe even on a very individual level. Like, you don't need to always organize interest groups collectively that then try to advocate for a cause. You could also think in your very own environment, hey, I should talk a little bit more with people of the other sex and ask them, hey, how do you feel about this, and what do I not know that you know, and what can I tell you that you don't know about, and how can we just build better relationships with each other, and how can we just practice that and gain implicit knowledge about each other, rather than trying to explicitly write all things down and try to fix every problem we have by making a law about it. So yeah, that's one of the that's the other open question that I propose as a first project, where you could probably figure out a lot of things about how a kind of activism would look like. That's more about weaving people together rather than dividing them into groups. Yeah, I hope I kind of figured out a way to explain my ideas so that you could follow me, and also you can give me both feedback about what I said, if there's anything that you didn't understand that I should reformulate in a future video, or you could give your own ideas about those two open questions, how one could approach them, what you think about these topics, what you think about activism, what you think about my idea of heterodox activism, what could be a possible approach to this kind of activism, what ideas you have about that. And yeah, aside from that, I tried to make my ideas a little bit more clear cut and systemically write them down in a blog post. So in the description you can find 3 links to basically the same blog post, just on a different platform. So whatever you feel is best for you, maybe it's Substack, maybe it's Medium, or maybe it's Blogger, just whatever you prefer. There you can read a more systematic text about those things that I just said here, and also give me feedback on that blog post. And if you're interested to see what kind of things I will do about the 2 projects I just proposed, then you can subscribe and follow, and yeah.